It's not this Rugby Union Show. It's That Rugby Union Show. Welcome back.
Well, we are finally back. Can you believe it? It's been a while, so an absolute pleasure to be back on, and welcome to That Rugby Union Show. Sim and X joining you, and I had to have a laugh because I don't look as staunch as that guy that you saw in the opening little montage there. But before we get into the rugby, we have to give some love to Coca-Cola's Be a Bok campaign, and you'll see that QR code on your screens right there next to me. And you can participate in that limited, by buying a limited edition Springbok Coca-Cola can. You'll see them everywhere in the shop. Scan the code, enter your chance to experience a Bok test week from inside the team environment, which is an awesome prize. And there'll be a winner for every Springbok home test, and we'll show you the campaign in action. And in fact, we are going to be meeting its first ever winner a little later on in the show. I will get back to all of that. We are here to talk about rugby. And Sim, so good to see you, man. It's been a while. I've missed doing this and having this chat with you.
Yeah, it has been a while. I mean, I've had a haircut as an ode to maybe finally going corporate. And yeah, I've probably aged about 10 years. So when you look at what AI is created of what we supposedly look like, I wish I looked like that guy.
Man, like I'm starting to feel like my arms are just, they go mad. But anyway, it's fine. I'll have to hit the gym. So, I mean, we already leading into match 2 of the international series of the Nations Championship, the inaugural one, North versus South. We've spoken about this. We've spoken about the potential of a global season, and I suppose this is the first step. And in fact, before we go into England, and we'll very briefly touch on what happened last weekend, Nations Championship, the future, the fact that we've been talking about a global season. Is this us slowly getting this?
Slowly being the operative word. I know that a lot of people are kind of saying, "Oh, geez, does World Rugby need another competition?" And obviously that's a rhetorical question because they're thinking it doesn't. But I don't know. You can't, as a rugby fan, have seen what happened last week in terms of the results, how close they were, how you had the right teams playing each other for a change. It's nice when you got the All Blacks playing against France. It's nice when you got Ireland playing against the Wallabies. Both teams, being separated about 2 points. Granted, England, South Africa was supposed to be the cherry on top, something even closer, but it didn't quite work out that way. But from what I can see, yes, it seems like another competition. But for me, it just feels like we've always had these incoming tests and outgoing tests, and they've now been given meaning, which kind of means everyone has to kind of play sort of to the same season in a way, because as France, you can't send your third best team anymore, out and out third best team, and lose because you lose points, and suddenly you're not going to be eligible to for the final at the end of the year. So I think by getting something to play for, it then means that part of the season that you're playing in, whether it's the end of your season or the start of your international season, as it is obviously with the North and Southern hemispheres, it becomes very important that you do turn up and you do actually try and play, which to me then suggests that once you get that right, once you get those teams playing sort of for the same points, trying to win the same competition, you then can get them playing in the same sort of calendar, which, becomes a global calendar.
Yeah, well, let's go into that England match because England did try to play, and the Springboks, that start would have put the fear of anyone, just the way they went about it. Those first 3 tries, that opening 15 to 20 minutes, unbelievable stuff. But there was a part of me that kind of harkened back to Australia, Ellis Park a year ago, where I thought we've seen this movie before. It looks very good up front, and they should run away with it. And then England struck back with 2 quick tries before halftime, and I started thinking, oh, well, maybe there's a soft underbelly there that we do need to be slightly concerned about. I mean, obviously, when you look at the scoreline at the end of it, maybe not that much, but there was something there. There was a moment where the performance dipped, and I don't know what that is. Is that overconfidence?
I wouldn't say it's overconfidence. I genuinely think England doesn't or didn't get enough credit for what they brought to the game. Yes, that first 15 minutes was a bit like the opening scene to Saving Private Ryan. And when the guys are landing in the beach there and they just get hammered from all ends with machine guns. It felt a bit like that. And yes, if you're a self-respecting South African fan, you did think that, oh, it's happening again, especially when England sort of drew up to within 3 points by halftime of the Springboks at halftime. But I think I think the Ponds just didn't get enough credit for what they did from the 15th minute to halftime, simply because at long last they got ball and they seemed to know how to use it. They went direct in their approach. And, actually there are some serious questions off the Springboks. It's just that obviously, what opened up the opportunity for them was the yellow card to Kurtley Arendse. And then once they'd used that, once they'd taken the momentum against the 14-man Springbok side, they kind of ran away with it a bit. But obviously, once the Boks, it was almost like one of those plan A and plan A reinforced situations in the second half instead of actually changing tack. Once the Boks did that, England did kind of fold a bit. And obviously those 2 yellow cards at the end can't possibly have helped them. I don't know. I didn't think they got particularly complacent. I just thought circumstances in the match and the fact that England actually are a bit better than we think they are. It's just that we're so used to sort of like looking at them and thinking, oh, they're not such a good team. And obviously, if you read their media are always so much harder on them. And the fact that they'd lost their 5th game in a row, it then kind of like made it a bigger loss than it was. But the most impressive thing about that game was the fact that the Springboks went into it without a single lock on the bench. This is a team that has always gone with 2 locks on the bench. And then over and above that, they then lost another lock and Siya Kolisi for like a total of, and then Eben and Esterhuizen obviously is that lock, for a combined total of 244 test caps, which was replaced by 1 cap between Hermanekon and Paul de Villiers. I think that for me was the most impressive thing about the Boks, the fact that they recovered from those setbacks and actually not only sort of like survived, but actually thrived.
Yeah, and I love seeing those the younger players, because it seems like it's very difficult for a young player to get into that Springbok side as a 21-year-old. Even at age 25, Rassie could be looking at you as a young option. England, I thought, really came out to try and the selection of Jack van Poortvliet at number 9 had me thinking, bit of an aerial game. They want to, really have contestables. They didn't really execute in the way that they would have. In fact, while I ask this question, then just a quick reminder that if you are watching and we've been off for a while and you have a comment or a question, please do drop it in and we'll definitely deal with that. But it almost looked to me like a team that's stuck between game plans almost. And I agree with you. England are not as bad as people tend to make out. And I think even they know that they're better than at least this scoreline and the Six Nations suggests. But they seem to be stuck between trying to figure out, and maybe there's an identity thing that might be lacking now. And the doubt will creep in when the results don't come.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting situations in that when you think about the Springboks and what makes the Springboks a good team, if you think of another team around the world that plays, anything close to what the Springboks actually do, it has to be England. They play with big direct forwards, good kicking game, abrasive defense. That's England at their best. If you take it back to say, the semi-final at the World Cup in 2023, they were basically, when they were winning that game, they were basically outboxing the Boks. They were doing what the Boks do particularly well. And so they have kind of like since sort of moved away from that. and tried to become a team that plays an awful lot more. They did try and borrow the Boks' defense, the blitz defense by borrowing Felix Jones. And it's one of those weird ones where Rassie said Steve Borthwick is the kind of coach that chases trends, kind of like, if that is true, and I don't know enough about coaches and rugby to say he definitely does. If that is true, it's very difficult to then develop an identity. But what I see is you now in South Africa can watch the Champions Cup, which then means you can watch teams like Northampton Saints, you can watch Bath, you can watch all these teams play. And when you look at their premiership clubs, it looks like the one thing they're very big on is attack, which then means if that's what you're playing in your domestic game, maybe you should play, what everybody is comfortable with, because those are the players you're going to be choosing. But obviously, you then shouldn't lose your DNA, a bit like the Boks have done in terms of its DNA first, and then you start evolving and evolving and evolving. If you look at the way the attack has gone with Tony Brown. But for me, the biggest separating thing between England and South Africa right here, right now, is sort of the refusal on Borthwick's part to sort of take the bull by the horns almost and take risks in his selections. There's no point having Henry Pollock in South Africa if you're going to put him on by the time the game is gone, which is after, around like with 20 minutes left. There's no point in having him. And I forget who the young winger is that does, he plays for Saracens, and it's Noah, what's Noah's surname? He does incredibly well under the high ball. He's the guy that takes the high ball above his head instead of in the breadbasket. So what happens is you've got these players and you've come to South Africa to sort of like outdo them at the kicking game, and you don't pick that guy. And you've got Pollock, you don't pick him. I just don't see the point of having all these guys, less than 18 months. I think it's like 13 months before the World Cup, and you're not even picking them. I don't understand why you wouldn't pick them if you've got them, because that's what Rassie's doing. He figures, if I'm going to need these guys, or I am going to need these guys, therefore I must play them, and to get some caps into them so that I can win the World Cup using them. So I think that's the biggest difference for me between the two teams. It's just that fear, sort of sticking to what you know and not quite showing the youngsters, the trust that you should be showing them.
Yeah, Noah Kaluori, I think.
Yes, Kaluori, that's it. He is insane under the high ball. He basically catches it like an AFL player instead of a typical rugby player who's going to get in underneath it and put it in the bread basket. He like takes it above his head, which and apparently he was told when he first arrived at Saracens, like, oh, this is how you should take it as an 18-year-old, and he was like, nah, I think I'll take it above my head. So it's that level of confidence, and that's you must play those guys. That's how you give yourself a chance of winning things, by playing guys like that. This sort of playing small and being afraid to play the youngsters, it's not going to get you anything.
Sure. I mean, the other guy who is, I see, going to have a run this weekend is Bernard Jansen van Rensburg. And I kind of expected to see that young tank have a run, and we saw him in the stands there. There was a shot of him singing or not singing the anthems.
Always singing.
Almost singing, wanting to sing the anthems, but it didn't quite come in. But yeah, I agree with you. They do have some exciting young players, but it takes quite a lot of bravery. We're zipping through this past match, and obviously you mentioned the young guys, Paul de Villiers, you've mentioned his name, Cam Hanekom getting a chance as well. Good to see them go, especially for Hanekom, who was out for, I think, all of 9 months with that injury of his. And I think the depth when it comes to loose forward, great. But now, as you mentioned, Sim, looking at the locks, those injuries are starting to count. They're starting to add up. And I think they started to add up from last season or last year already, especially if you look at a guy like Eben. I'm not too worried about the likes of Ox. He's going to be back. Sia, we'll have to wait to see. But Eben, I don't know if he's going to be making it back, especially when they talk about concussion-related injuries.
Yeah, I must admit I'm as worried as you are. I actually did I'm doing a story for this weekend about whether we might have to brace ourselves for a title defense next year without him. And in trying to do that, obviously you've got to do the research. That concussion that he suffered against Exeter kept him out of the game for a good 4 months. And obviously, there was also the ban, for 12 weeks. And long story short, since December, Eben's only played 3 matches. And it seems like all he has to do now is think about hip contact or, for him to get a concussion, which is not a pleasant thing. Now, most people would come back to you and say to you, look, Richie McCaw had similar symptoms sort of towards the end of his career. And what happened there was came back and won a whole World Cup afterwards. But the simple difference is the way sort of concussion protocols had become stricter may actually be, the reason that why we may have to start worrying about whether, Eben Esterhuizen is actually going to be there for the title defense. Look, 141 test caps. A lot of people, it's nice to look at it and say it's such a great thing to achieve. But those are all brutal rugby games. And at some stage or other, they have to take their toll.
Yeah, they do have to take their toll as indeed. But then again, I will say in defense of England, although regardless of what the Australians managed to achieve last year, that was anomalous. It doesn't happen that teams come to Ellis Park and walk away with a victory or even sometimes a close game. So, I mean, it is the fortress. It's a tough place. It is, sort of the heart of South African rugby. And what an opportunity, a couple of winners from the Coca-Cola Beer Boks campaign to actually experience a little bit of that. And I spoke about it earlier on, and that campaign gives supporters a chance to experience the test week from inside the team environment, which not a lot of people get to do. So let's quickly take a look at how Coca-Cola brought the campaign to life around the game at Ellis Park. Man, it is a special thing, and I got to experience a little bit of that by virtue of a bit of journalism, but to do it as a fan, I think is absolutely special to, see what the insides of that very special place looks like, to be on the field as well, to be in the change rooms, meet Rassie Erasmus and a couple of players. That's fantastic. And in fact, the first supporter to get that call was earlier on, I think it was in 2025, when Dogozo Mtunu from Dlamini in Soweto won that prize. As an actor, he appeared in season 2 of Shtaka Ilembe, which is a great series. He's been booked for season 3. So, this guy is doing incredibly well. But this time around in season 3, apparently he's got lines. He's very excited. It's the pinnacle of his acting career. But he even said that even that didn't quite match up to what he experienced as a Springbok fan.
Unbelievable. It's out of this world. Like, hey, I can write a book about this day. Yeah, I took back out. Now I message WhatsApp. Hey, Togo, how are you? Hey, you are in the finalist. I'm a serious now. My finalist. Next day, like, hey, you have won. The first moments I had, I went through to the tunnel, going through to the ground. On my feet, singing the national anthem with everyone in front of our boys. You won't get that anywhere.
Oh, absolutely fantastic for any fan. And Sim, you're probably the worst person to talk to about these things because you hardly get flustered at big moments at Rugby Stadia, having seen so many of them. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is when you're in that media suite, there's no emotion. You're not allowed to express any emotion. So this one, as a fan, it's really special because, we've been lucky enough to be close to the team and see how things work, but it is something to behold if you've never seen it.
Listen, in a strange way, actually, I haven't been that close to the team. I've never been inside a Boks changing room when the players are actually in it. Maybe before or after they've gone, but never actually, in real time to meet them, to talk to them, and stuff like that. I mean, you do have to remember that the poor guys have to speak to us. Have to speak to us being the operative word. Like they speak to us because they have to. It's always like in their contract. So actually, it's a lot more exciting than we ever get to, because like you say, we sort of in the stiff upper lip suits where we kind of like sit up there and we're trying to make sure that you look impartial. Cheslin Colby steps someone into the parking lot and you kind of like, you nod sagely instead of, getting out of your seat with excitement. So yeah, I must say, this is actually closer than anything I ever get to be with the players without a contract compelling them to.
Yeah, but it just means you need to also click on that QR code. You should hit there as well.
That's good, yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, but there'll be another winner, another beer Bok winner for every Springbok home chest. And participate, buy the limited Springbok Coca-Cola can, scan the QR code, the one that's on screen right now as well. And you could find yourself in this picture. He's doing it. Go for it. Buy a scan, enter. The next call could be for you, like it was for Dogoza. But Scotland. Let's move on to what's coming up this weekend. We promise we're going to keep today short, but there's always so much to talk about. But the Scots, quite a different proposition, coming off a really good win, 47-38 over Argentina in Argentina. That doesn't happen very easily. Gregor Townsend, great coach. We've seen what the Scots can do. They utilize their imports, their South Africans, very, very well, very smartly, I think. And the one guy I'm really excited about is Kyle Steyn. And maybe as we begin this chat, maybe we could put the Scottish team up, because it really is a very, very good team. And I'm very interested to see what happens with young Kyle Steyn. I'm not calling him out because he's a South African, but it's the first time that he gets to play against the Springboks in South Africa. I'm sure his family, him coming from Gauteng, will be in the stands, watching, supporting. I can't imagine what that moment must be like, but he is one of the key players.
No, he most definitely is. He's done some incredible work, obviously, as the captain of Glasgow. I think I'm trying to think back to their quarterfinal in the URC. They were playing against Connacht, and Connacht was proving such a tough nut to crack in that game, in that quarterfinal. And the guy who broke that game apart was Kyle. I think he scored about 2 tries in quick succession, and suddenly what looked like a really tricky sort of banana peel of a game, was sorted out. My only disappointment is that Cheslin Colby is not playing in this game, because Cheslin's Insipulsa commentary nickname is the bodyguard from Beijing, as in Jet Li, of course. And obviously Kyle is Rory Steyn's son, who was obviously Madiba's bodyguard all those years ago. So it would have been nice to have the bodyguard from Beijing playing against the bodyguard's son. So that's the only disappointment I have from the configuration of the teams. But looking at both teams, it's actually going to be quite a tight game. It's actually going to be quite a tricky game for the Boks. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out, altitude or not.
Yeah, and I went it easy because he is one of the obvious names to highlight. Kyle Steyn, maybe Sione Tuipulotu, the captain, also Finn Russell, I would say. But the one name that for me has been really, really good. Piers Kuman is another obvious one. Is Rory Dodge, their number 7. That guy has got something.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. He's a classical open side flank, sort of hard nosed, does all the jobs that nobody else wants to do. He'll get his head, he'll get his head where other people, wouldn't dare to do it. Where the boots are. Really tough, classical, open side, and a guy who's done incredibly well in terms of playing for Glasgow. One of the things about playing for Glasgow is that a lot of people look at their skill and whatnot, but one of the things they do really well is they are actually quite a tough team, because Franco Smith is obviously a very, very demanding sort of coach when it comes to the basics of the game, the physicality, the set piece, and stuff like that. And this Scottish side, this 23, has got 13 guys from Glasgow, 3 from Edinburgh, with obviously the rest coming from overseas clubs like Northampton, and I think also in Toulon, in the in a guy like scrum half like Ben White. So it's going to be quite a hard-nosed team that the Scots are going to put out there, and that's why the Boks have to be careful. And especially looking at the Boks, the fact that the Boks, have one of the less sort of experienced teams that they've put out in quite a while. I'm sure we're going to talk about those caps just now.
Yeah. And I mean, last week's worry in the lead up to the England game was that the guys might be a little underdone. First test match, yes, there was the Barbarians the week before, but not quite the same as the test match environment. And 13 changes, these are wholesale changes from Rassie, also means that second week in a row, we'll go in with a team that will feel underdone, that is still going to be experiencing its first step up into test level.
Exactly. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about the difference between England and South Africa at the moment. Rassie is not afraid to throw guys in at a comparative deep end. I wouldn't say it's an out and out deep end. It's a comparative deep end, just to have a look see. Because a lot of coaches, I think in the past, coaches used to sort of try and blood players in dead rubbers, where there was nothing to lose in those games. Rassie's completely the other way around, which makes absolute sense, which is he throws you into a game that's a must-win game, because then how you go in that game tells you so much more than, if you had a sort of free hit, as it were, in a game that didn't matter. You've won the series you 2-0 up on a 3-match series, and now they put you in, and you're not so worried. You can play, you can be free. So it teaches them an awful lot to do that. So, but still, I mean, you have to say it's incredibly brave to go with a team with, I think it's 544 caps overall, and then 171 in the forwards, and that 171 amongst the forwards has Peter Steph du Toit with 96 on his own. That's more than half the caps to one guy. And then when you look at the bench that's going to come on, they've only got 69 test caps between them. So if this gets close as a game or gets disrupted by injuries, you are going to have to, we're going to rely on players that probably haven't been there to sort of calm anyone around them before. So that's why I'm actually looking at this game and I'm thinking, hang on, we need to be careful here. This needs to go right. For example, Henry Pollard is a fly-off, but the backup is actually Keon Horn. And I asked today at the press conference, I said, so with Damien Willemse, who has played fly-off for the Boks before at 12, I kind of thought if anything happened to Henry Pollard, Damien would shift over to 10. But when you look at the rest of the team, no one is a natural 12. And so he kind of has to stay there. And so the answer I got was, no. Keon, having sort of had one audition there at fly-off, is also back fullback. He will be the fly-off if Henry Pollard has to cry off with injury or anything else of the sort. So I mean, that's the level of risk taking that you've got with you've got with Rassie and this team. And incidentally, this is Rassie's this is the game that makes Rassie the most kept, if you want to call it that, Springbok, Springbok coach, or the most long-serving Springbok coach, which I find quite interesting, obviously, because the rest of us thought, he was still coach when Jacques Nina
Was fronting the press conferences. Is that what you were?
he was, he was coaching the team from the touchline as the water carrier, So, yeah, it's interesting for him to finally sort of finally get over the line in terms of being the most long-serving. I mean, he has been involved for 8 years, so it's unprecedented in South African rugby. I think the most anyone's ever been involved before was half the time. And obviously, Rassie is, by dint of having been there that long and winning, most importantly, he becomes the longest serving, Springbok coach in the process.
Which is crazy to me. The other crazy thing that I was reading about is that we've never played Scotland at Ellis Park, at Loftus, I beg your pardon. Is that even possible?
No, I think it's something like 12 years since Scotland last played at well, they seem to think, when we spoke to them, they seem to think that it was 12 years. But I think the Boks seem to think it's never happened before. So I'm not sure whose hypothesis will prove truer. But either way, it's been an incredibly long time. But the one thing that kind of negates that or nullifies that sort of would-be advantage is the fact that, you've had all these teams from Glasgow come through and play at Loftus against the Bulls, and you've also obviously had Edinburgh come down and play and play at Loftus. So I think by dint of having had those teams play, Gregor Townsend was actually saying that those players, he came in. I think he said he'd never played at Loftus, but the players were kind of telling him, this is where the hotel is, this is how it is, this is how this pitch plays, and like the players are quite clued up on what it's like, which sort of nullifies it. But Gregor also said that, look, it's one thing to come down to play the Bulls here and beat them like Glasgow did in 2024, and it's entirely another to play the Springboks there.
Before we go into match predictions, I'm gonna just see if we can stick up the Springbok team once more. I think that Springbok fans, as you said, there is a little bit of concern here, and we do tend to be overconfident, especially when it comes to a team like Scotland. Rassie, on the other hand, will look at this as, hey, I've got to blend in as much talent as possible in the lead up to 2027. So he, I think, won't be as worried as the rest of us if the Springboks were to go on and lose this game because of the makeup of that team. Are there a couple of guys here who maybe didn't think that they in with a chance for next year, but all of a sudden find themselves with the opportunity to impress the coach, with an opportunity? I'm thinking of the likes, and you mentioned the bench, very young guys. Zach Porthen, very, very young. Quan Horn never had a real run at fly half except against the Barbarians. The Vincent Chituga also in and around the edges of the squad. There are a couple of guys here who they'll want to impress.
Yeah, you can actually take that into the starting lineup as well. Embrose Papier hasn't played for the Springboks in 8 years. He hasn't played. Ironically, he was picked by Rassie and Jacques Nina, but 8 years ago, and he played the 7 caps that he has under them, and then he just disappeared for 8 years. As other guys, Faf, Jaden Hendricks, Treinach, so many other guys, kind of like played at that scrum half instead. Evan Roos, all is a big question mark around him, or let me not say all is a big question mark. Let me say all is a big debate around. A lot of people feel that he should play more, especially as the highest try scorer in the URC this season. All is, and these detractors say he's a bit of a sort of one trick pony. And these are all the things that, they're going to have to sort of come in and have a look at. But I think those in the starting lineup, the two guys with the most to prove are probably Embrose Papier, Efren Roos. A guy like Paul de Villiers, having started the way he did, and being an out and out open side flanker is probably not gonna, he's not gonna feel under undue pressure because they really, really do think highly of him. Apparently, he's the fittest guy in the team. To come in from outside and be regarded as the fittest guy in the Boks team, speaks volumes about you. And so I think those are the guys that will have something of a big point to prove. But then again, it goes back to, it was a question asked today, which I think is a very important question to ask. When you've got that many guys with a point to prove, don't you then kind of like almost go into a trial situation where guys are kind of like breaking with like departing from system simply because they've got a point to prove, instead of playing together? I'll take you back to a game against Wales in 2022, which was the second of 3 tests. I think the Boks had won by 2 points. They'd won 32-29 at Loftus with Damian Willemse last minute penalty. And then Rassie changed 14 of the 15 guys in the starting lineup to play that. And they went to Bloemfontein. And then I think they lost 13-12 to Wales. And it was essentially, what I felt at the time happened was it's all kind of like every man for himself. So I think sometimes, you can engender that, but it is 4 years later. Maybe the guys are that much more aligned and attuned with what's expected of a Springbok team, because, you try to ask that and the guys are just kind of like, look, we're just excited. And the important thing to do is, apparently they've got a saying that the system will protect you. So basically, if you break out of system, then, you've got no protection. So it seems to me, and that seems to be the approach. We'll know sooner, rather than later, tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks, Samuel DC 1065, your comment. Obviously, he knows it's the first time they played together at Loftus, says Samuel, but the last time the two teams played each other at South Africa, Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium, 2014. So maybe the Springboks are correct there. And there's also always going to be these great little subplots. And the one that I think I really like, Boan Venter versus Piers Skuman, although they're not necessarily going to be scrimming directly against each other.
No, it's Wilke Lowen. It's Wilke Lowen and Piers. That should be fun.
But I mean, with Boan and Piers, those guys play for the same team, right? Like, I just wonder, they've played together a couple of times. I wonder what that's going to look like afterwards, but it's going to be a phenomenal match. And I think it is what you want to see. We want to see the Springboks tested. We want to see them tested where possibly doesn't matter as much as well. I don't want to necessarily underplay the importance of the Nations Championship. But I can't wait for this one. I think it's going to be a tough battle. Loftus, though, is a fortress. And I don't know. How do you see this one panning out?
Look, maybe because I'm an older guy, I tend to be a glasses half empty sort of guy. So last week when they didn't select a lock on the bench, I spent the whole week talking about locks not being on the bench and worrying about it. And then the moment they lost Eben and Esterhuizen as well, I was just like, oh geez, now we done. And then they go and play like they did. This week, they haven't chosen a lock. They haven't chosen a lock on the bench again. They've gone with 3 loose forwards, and obviously, I've now zeroed in on the fact that Peter Steps du Toit has 96 caps, is more than half of the rest of the pack, this is more than half of the pack's test caps, and so I've zeroed in on that, and I'm kind of harping on. I'm like, geez, how dangerous that is for the Boks. So I'm kind of thinking, it's all very dangerous for the Boks. But having seen what I saw last week, maybe, it doesn't matter how good the Scottish side is. And this is probably the best side they've put together and with the most depth they've ever put together. And, they have traveled, first to Argentina, and then they've traveled here, and it's going to be at altitude. I think that'll count against them. Those things still count. So I do think Boks, yes, but not by as much as, say, Boks against England.
Right. Yeah. Good. But an exciting one nonetheless. But before we go, really great to be back, man, and good to see people back on in the comments. And we'll be back again after the match. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about after the match is done on Sunday. But before we go, congratulations once again to Ntokozo Mchunu, Coca-Cola's first beer Bok winner. And there'll be a winner, like I mentioned, for every Springbok home test. So do buy a participating limited edition Coca-Cola can. Scan the QR code, which has been on screen. It will appear again. Enter, by scan, enter the next supporter living the Bok experience could be you. And in the comments, keep them going after this conversation. Tell us what your predictions are and maybe even scoreline and which players you think will pose the greatest threat. YouTube betting saying Boks by 10. I think that's fair. I think if I were to make a call, I wouldn't say as much as Boks by 12, 15, 20. I think Boks by 10 is good, but also if they do win by more, I'm not going to complain at all. But yeah, it's been really good to catch up. But before we go, round 2 of the Nations Championship. There's some pretty nice matchups to look forward to in this round. Starts with New Zealand against Italy. I suppose it would be easy to say New Zealand the favourites, but I can't wait to see that Italian scrum test the Kiwis.
Yeah, I think, having seen Italy lose to Japan, I do wonder if Italy sort of picked the All Black game as the one game that they're going to target. So I think the Italy we're going to get against the All Blacks tomorrow is probably the Italy that the Boks got end of year tour, which is a very tough proposition. But having said that, and, having looked at their scrum and whatnot, having said that, there is a distinct improvement about how the All Blacks play. They just that a little bit more ruthless than they were last year. So, Italy might sort of have targeted the game, but they might have targeted kind of like almost like the wrong to put it into words. So yeah, I still think the All Blacks are going to win, especially at home.
Just a very quick look at the remainder of the fixture list. Australia will be up against France, who've had to travel a lot. Aussies got a blood nose by Ireland last week. The French will feel that they could have taken on New Zealand. Japan takes on Ireland, Fiji versus England, and of course Argentina against Wales. But I think the one that really has me fascinated is that France-Australia game in Australia. What do you make of that one?
Both teams incredibly unlikely to lose last week. I don't know. As well as Australia playing, they look like they've picked up from where they left off here. And when I say last year, I'm not talking about the end of year tour, because I think they went off the boil there. I'm talking about sort of rugby championship Australia. They seem to have picked up from there, which means they're playing really good rugby. But I don't know. I just don't think they have enough to beat France.
Right. Well, then I said,
even if they're playing at home.
Say again?
Even if they're playing at home.
Even if they play at home. Yeah, I agree. The French are good. Even though the French had to do all of the travel as well, I still think they're going to pose a lot of questions to the Australians. But as I mentioned, keep those comments coming. And thank you to Coca-Cola for making sure that we are back. And it's what a pleasure. It was so nice to see the comments. We'll be back. We'll review the action as well as we did on a Sunday morning. Love those chats as well. So yeah, we'll certainly love to see what you guys at home watching this make of the way the Springboks have gone. But I'm expecting a really exciting match. Yes, it's been good to be back, man. Really excited.
Sensational. I look forward to Sunday, actually.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. And let's see what it is we are going to be facing when we are back on Sunday. Cheers.
unbelievable. It's out of this world. Like, hey, I can write a book about this day. Yeah, 3 weeks back, I message WhatsApp. Hey, how are you? Hey, you are in the finalist. I'm a serious. I'm a finalist. Next day, like, hey, you have won. The best moments I had, I went through to the tunnel, going through to the ground. On my feet, singing the national anthem with everyone in front of our boys. You won't get that anywhere.
It's not this Rugby Union Show. It's That Rugby Union Show.